At Home Ventures, we back founders very early in the journey. Some of them just inspire you because of their vision with the outcome that they are going for. And today, we'll be meeting one of our key portfolio companies, Skyroot Aerospace.
Skyroot Aerospace is now worth $1 billion.
मैं पवन कुमार चंद्रमा और नागा भर डाका बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं।
Hey, hi Chetan, how are you?
Good to see you, man. Long time. All
Long
well.
time, all good, all good. Good to see you in
Looking
Hyderabad.
fitter and sharper.
Thank you, you as well.
No, great to be here and looking forward to our chat today. Super excited for the upcoming launch.
Yeah. So very exciting things happening, and really we're also super excited for the launch. So let's get in.
Sure, let's do.
And we are now a few weeks away from the launch. So what's the excitement like?
Oh yeah, so it feels very electric. Finally, all things are coming together, and it's a very important milestone for Skyroot, for India, and also for the global space ecosystem, where you'll have a new orbital vehicle. Very excited. So years of effort all coming together, and a few more weeks to go.
So this, of course, like the first orbital launch attempt, like we experienced nearly 50% of it, I must say, with the first launch of Vikram S during suborbital launch. So all the adrenaline rush and the tension for the last minute countdown, we've been trained partially. We can say at least some of our team, but now we've grown much bigger, and the milestone is also 10x harder and 10x bigger. So this will be special, and like always finger crossed for till we achieve the orbital milestone.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of responsibility to shoulder, but that's how the space industry is. Always it will keep continuing because this is just the first launch, orbital launch. We already did one launch, the orbital launch, and there'll be more and more launches. So I think it's a cycle which goes on for our journey. So it's every time there'll be a good responsibility to shoulder on, and that's what makes it exciting as well. So it's a very major, big milestone, and that's what keeps us going. Wake up every day in the morning, keeps us on our toes, makes us push our boundaries, and build these milestones again and again. So yeah.
And does that help because you guys were at ISRO for 6-7 years and also been part of that journey? So somewhere you got that kind of training to handle that stress and pressure.
Yeah, and there is a that's true actually. That's one of the things that will help. And there is a principle in rocketry that every launch is treated as a first launch, even if multiple, even in ISRO, like as we go closer to the T0, the more you feel that it's the first launch, even if it's the PSLV's 40th launch or so that every launch is a first launch concept is truly followed even in the preparation and how we test and how with the rigor with which we need to attend to every issue. So that factor of tension is a part and parcel of how rocketry works, not just for the first launch.
So if I kind of go back to I think end of 2021 is where we met initially, and from my perspective, at that time you were one of those early founders building in space tech from India. And if we cut to today, you guys are the poster boys for space tech, the rocket boys. Skyroot is something which our honorable Prime Minister Modi ji keeps talking about on television, and everyone is now gearing up for the full launch coming up. In your case especially, failure, or in ISRO's case, right? Failure is something which is broadcasted live, right? So how do you kind of just prepare yourself, right? Because founders need to listen to this because it's just the kind of mindset required to prepare for failure where you're just broadcasted live.
Yeah, so I think one of the very important aspect of being in this industry, especially being a rocket engineer, is we simulate all the failures in the mind already. So that's what keeps running in our mind always. For example, when we did the Vikram S launch, all through those final days, only simulations running in the mind what could go wrong, so that it keeps us on our toes to check have we done the right thing, have we taken care of that? Because sometimes some very minute things are missed and that causes failure. So this paranoia always is part of the journey. It's a very positive force for a rocket engineer or a team which is building rockets. So failures are actually very accepted. I mean, both in the industry, sometimes failures are also celebrated because milestone itself we want to launch. The failure is always a learning, and it's a clear certainty that you're going to get better next time because you know why it failed and you exactly know how to fix it. So failures are very accepted even in our culture. I mean, we accept failures and we take it as a real stepping stones of success. It's been a very cliched statement always that we hear that failures are stepping stones to success, but in rocket industry, it is the force of growth. So it's accepted in the part of the culture, and yeah, so definitely, so we don't fear failures, but we always in a paranoia to avoid them as much as we can.
Yeah. And there'll be a lot of learning in the first launch also, because the first launch is generally heavily put with instrumented with sensors to get a lot of information. So like even if something goes like even just rocket clears the atmospheric phase, we get plethora of information, like 90% of the very useful information for all subsequent launches we already have in place. So that's the kind of the key value out of the first launch is more of that. And if everything goes well in the first click, there's a good amount of effort behind it, but there's also a luck factor that the unknowns didn't play a role in the first launch itself.
And you know only when it is launched. As you said earlier, that you already kind of plan for a lot of things, and you are driving simulations internally before. So let's say we are at the launch site, and rocket is taking off, and it has met all the parameters, is successful. So what's your first 50 seconds where how are you dealing with this in your mind?
Yeah, but I think if you put a meter of our emotion, right? So just before launch, it'll be like red, So it's like highest, probably stress and tension, and this will happen, I'm sure, for like even the 20th launch or 30th launch. This is like the part and parcel of the space industry, and then and then we'll be I'm sure like super focused on what's really happening on the data. And then if things go well, and in fact, it should go well like for until the last minute, so things can go wrong even the last second as well. So it should be like, it'll be red until, finally we put a satellite into orbit. And after that, I think it's be like, the emotion which you can't describe. So similar to what we had during the launch of Vikram S, right? It feels so fulfilling. The moment we see our mission achieved, it's really, because all these things all happens in few minutes.
Second.
Yeah, so, and then years of effort all shows up in few minutes. And that's where it's just like, having a India-Pakistan match, the final over, right? And then when you win it, how is the emotion? Like Indians know the emotion of, winning a cricket match. And that's exactly how it feels. The moment you launch a satellite to orbit or meet the mission requirement.
This is more like hitting a last ball 6.
Yes, hitting a 6 in the last ball. You need to hit a 6 to win, and you hit a 6 in the last ball. That's exactly how every rocket launch happens. Yeah, there's like phenomenal excitement the moment we meet the mission requirements.
Especially the first 100-200 seconds will be even more critical, and once we lift off, right? It won't be it won't be a stagnant feeling. Like there are throughout the ascent phase, there will always be high failure probability events. As we and the closer we approach, our BP will rise, and once that milestone is crossed, and again it will fall down, and the tension for the next milestone will come in place. So that's how how every ball matters just before ball makes contact with the bat, how they feel in the last over. It will exactly be like that. So once we cross all uncertainties or near failure probabilities, and everything gets cleared, it will be. But yeah, this is something as we speak, I wanted to touch wood multiple times, but yeah, that's now.
So also from where we are in the overall ecosystem, space tech, obviously we spoke about is now emerging. So today, if you were building it today, how do you see the space sector kind of growing in India? And also, what are the other potential opportunities you're seeing for a founder to kind of start building?
Yeah. So first thing is the best part of our space industry is global. You know, so whatever you build, the service, the product goes global, and there are very few options globally. And so when you make it, you're one of the very few, and it's extremely tough to make it. And that's what makes it exciting, and that's what makes the opportunity larger. And so India has all the foundations and the building blocks to make it happen. And every company needs to build their own recipe, own level of problem solving to be able to crack it. So that's what we are doing right now, and milestone after milestone. Now, once the orbital launch happens, this is an industry where you have $1 trillion company. So that means like the opportunity is as big as you can execute well, still good and still growing. And then this is also a real blue ocean. What we call it, the blue ocean, right? So and then like opportunities can be created by yourselves with the capabilities you build, and you can actually stretch the market as well. So because a very nascent phase, space is the next frontier, and what you can do with space is as much as you can build, right? So that's where very large opportunity, and India has all the building blocks, and so being positioned here and be able to execute it is a very great advantage. And so your velocity also becomes faster, like how you can execute things fast, and then also like you can do it at the incredibly high cost efficiency never seen before in the space sector. So all these extra advantages come into picture. And the next few years, how we see it is typically like being one of the like Bharat mentioned, one of the very key launch players, because launch is fundamental to the space industry. You need to be able to launch things to space to be able to like open up the economy. So the key facet of the space industry is what we are solving. And as we give like more and more launch capacity, our plan is also to establish ourselves as a very reliable, strong launch player, and also expand it further, like by a step function, to be able to we have plans to build much bigger reusable vehicles, which will even further reduce the cost, further increase the capacity of what you can launch from Earth to space, and then the journey goes on, right? So it's like a very incredibly the long and exciting journey, and with very few players, and with a phenomenal opportunities if we make it well, right? So that's what keeps us super excited so far with all the learning curve which we had over the last few years. It's only a great foundation to even fly higher.
And as you to the point of what founders starting now can focus, because the space industry is transforming, like you say, can be, if the phases can be categorized, like we're kind of transitioning from a new space 1.0 to new space the 2.0 kind of phase, where in the next decade, like things that go up is not just satellites, it's going to be majorly infrastructure. So and amount of up 90% of up mass, mass that goes from Earth to orbit is going to be infrastructure. And there's a lot of solutions, as Pawan mentioned, that people can apply, where like with the conventional thinking, like we cannot, lot of manufacturing in space. There's a lot of buzz around data centers, and there's a lot of things that are going to happen in space, where the space solutions that are available on ground, but for to be able to use in space specific situations are essential for the auxiliary mechanisms that enable these infrastructure in space. So a lot of opportunity there to actually enable this new space 2.0 ecosystem for the next decade. A lot of technologies that sustain, that work well in space without any maintenance requirement are required. So those are the key opportunities that founders can work on to be able to.
So much of our minerals, earth, everything comes from space today. For our travel, we need navigation. We need earth observation. There is so much scope. R&D in space is now one of our portfolio companies is doing that. So there's so much happening. I truly agree. When you are building an organization like this, which is and you have a sudden ramp up of people, the whole culture of the organization, and how do you really build that culture?
No, I think see, what differentiates a startup from everybody else is typically being very agile, and adapt to the various phases, because startups are meant to grow fast, and we have been growing crazy, as you know, right? Every year, like, we're doubling in strength, like a lot of milestones, and then, like, it's different every year. Like, 3 years back, I can't imagine myself, or like, personally as well, and also like at the company as well, there's so much of change, right? So that adaptability is very, very much important. And so the culture which fits a 100 people company and is very different from a culture which fits a 300 people company, a 700 people company, a 1000 people company, right? So we have to adapt to that change and problem solve it as we go further. And as we always say at Skyroot, so we do two things. One is rocket engineering, the other is people engineering, right? So this is very, very essential parts of building the organization, and it is as tough as rocket engineering, because building the culture which builds the rocket is as important as building the rocket. So it's really, because both cannot go independent to each other. So it's very, very important to build a very agile, innovative, high problem solving, and have that the drive to execute things very fast at this level of scientific rigor. The technical rigor which goes into building a rocket is extreme. The level of details which are the details which every engineer needs to get into is not normal to other industries. So this is something, building that rigor, that culture of agility, innovation, and integrity.
Kind of aligned to the larger mission.
Aligned to the larger mission, aligning everybody. You always see that the smartest people don't get along with each other. So it's very important for to build a very collaborative environment with the smartest people across fields coming together and work with each other, right? And then, like, build a very collaborative output very quick. And then, like, if there is a problem, solve it very quick, change directions. It's a problem of a lot of variables, a very exciting problem to solve, and we have been tackling it at every phase at journey of Skyroot at enough velocity which is required to be able to do it. Yeah.
What is the next 4 years looking like?
For next 4 years, for every launch company journey, like reaching to orbit is one of the biggest milestone. And once we achieve that, that's the most difficult milestone. And post that, as I mentioned, ability to repeatedly achieve the same milestone, and ability to, because that problem is fundamentally different than this. Because here, actual design engineers hands-on handhold the rocket till production testing to the launch pad. Once we go into production mode, we can't afford the people who design to be hands-on in the production mode also. So the production and testing has to be, the documentation has to improve. The people have to be trained well to actually test and say okay to system where when the people who design systems are not there and doing what's next is required for the company in the future. So this is the next, the most challenging part that we as a company should implement to be able to repeatedly achieve that. So that's where a company we can differentiate ourselves to be able to stand out in the world as one of the top 3-4 players in the world to be able to do this from India in effort.
You would have met so many investors. So what was how were you able to then, kind of convince investors about investing in this space so early?
Yeah, so I think what we always found, right? All our investments are a single meeting, investments, So we meet, the alignment happens or doesn't happen. That's it, So it's just like 0 or 1, typically. And what we see is that every investment which turned out, it's more like, the excitement to participate in the journey, and also excitement to, walk with us in a very uncharted territory. Is what, like, really, and then typically all investors we see, like, they're founders first. Typically, the journey is, super complicated, super challenging. And, it's their comfort that we'll be able to do the right thing, and then they can help, us in the journey, right? So that alignment just happens. How we approach problem solving, how we approach the technicalities, how we approach building the business, right? So those fundamentals, if they are fully aligned, then I think the marriage happens. So that's how it happened. Either like almost every investment we had happened in the single meeting, right? And then it's a very and most of them are new, never invested in space sector before, right? So that's it. That is basically the excitement of joining hands in a very exciting and very new journey is what actually made it happen. So So what we require is basically to share what we think. Honestly, this is be very transparent about how we approach building the business, and then the alignment happens with a few, and then the journey begins. So this has been, but we initially in the early phase before GIC came in, I think almost 50% of our time was almost spent in talking to investors, raising capital, etc. Because that's everything. That's actually the initial currency to build the prototypes and scale the team, etc. So that's where a lot of our time went. And then once the policy came in, and then once we made good progress, and especially I think GIC coming in has flipped a lot of things for us. And after that, we hadn't been spending so much time really focusing on products, building the organization, etc. But the initial phase was, I think, really exciting, and literally it's the connection with the investor more to do, because very early phase, right? Very difficult to, so many variables, floating around. Even for you, I'm sure, it's just the connection, and then you are ready to take the plunge, and then the fundamentals are really in place, and then taking the risk and going forward, right? So that's how it has been.
I think in the Aeronautical Congress, basically Astronautical Congress, one of the biggest space congresses that happened in Dubai that day. And that time, and that's the first time we met in 2021. And I could see even just after the first meet, very new concept, the excitement and enthusiasm in you to actually back this and support our endeavor was clearly evident, Chetan. And that materialized, and I think you paid a visit to India for that. And it was the first, even the first time that conviction was very evident. And there were very few people in 2021 phase, very few people like you in the institutional seed stage. Institutional investment was very rare. And especially for space tech ecosystem, things have changed a lot from 2022 onwards.
Yeah.
Post the space reforms. Prior to that, it was a lot of educative effort because there is a regulatory uncertainty factor also, where more individual investors can take a bet on the vision, but institutional investors, they have their own constraints. So that has reforms have enabled that, and I'm sure now there's a good seed
Ecosystem
seed
developing.
availability
also
for
supporting
any
it.
space venture that's now.
But did you get at any point in time discouraged because by hearing no's from investors?
Yeah, see, basically, my spirit always has been to just go all in. For example, when we started Skyroot, I thought we'll not raise capital. The policy will not come for 10 years. We'd have to struggle a lot. And I was ready for, all in, going all in. I'm sure same with Bharat as well. So that's how we approached it. So our expectations were very, very low. And always as an entrepreneur, always thinks in extremes. What is the worst thing which is going to happen? And then do everything to optimize the best thing while still being prepared for the worst. So that's always been approach. And so it's not we expect that there'll be a lot of rejections with investors, because it's a completely new industry. It's a no thesis for space. In fact, it evolved as we build the company. The thesis for space across various funds, and even the technology has to be evolved. First time it's happening in India in the private sector. A lot of unknowns on the go, and even the policy also, right, to be figured out by the government. In such a very complex field, it's not very easy. Moving so fast at the pace which we are going is incredible. I mean, incredible things happening in India, So I think all happening, coming together in the journey of Skyroot. I think it's been a really rare and incredible, fulfilling journey. And so always prepared for the worst, optimizing for the best. This has been the principle so far. So never.
Founders also.
Yes. Yeah. So I think the discouragement is probably momentarily. So it keeps happening. But I think prepared for the worst scenarios. Always.
And one of the good advice we got from our investors is take every no as not yet than a permanent no. Right. So just and we can come back later, kind of, so that won't hit your heart. And not yet is always better to the mind than no. So that's one way to play with. If there's a lot of challenge to people in any industry, some other deep tech venture might be in the same kind of situation now.
Yeah.
So anywhere there's a lot of educative effort, a lot of effort that goes in. The conversion rate is very low, single-digit percentage. This mindset helps most of the founders to actually.
And kind of your journey together as co-founders, was that kind of planned from day one, or is that something? How did you guys come together?
Yeah, firstly, we joined ISRO together, and we were staying together. So we're in the same house, the flatmates. In fact, we came to know that we grew up in the same city, Vizag. After we never met while growing together, but after joining ISRO, we came to know that we had a similar journey where, we grew up in Vizag, and then, we got into IIT. So we went to IIT Madras. I went to IIT Kharagpur, and our paths crossed again when we joined ISRO together. And he's from an electronics background. I'm from a mechanical background. We're working on a similar project at ISRO, right, on the India's largest rocket program. And we was staying in the same house. We were flatmates, and that connection happened. We became very close friends, and intellectually also, we were very in sync with each other. And the moment got an idea of building a rocket company, so Bharat came to my mind, and then I pitched to him, and then he was also excited to take the plunge and start at a time when, as you know, there was no policy, there was no funding environment. Literally, we started in a plain sheet of paper with with at that time looked it's impossible to do this, or the probability of success is so low, right? So we started then, and I think it's been an incredible journey working with him every day. So we complement each other in various ways, and both in our technical expertise and also how we approach problem solving. So when we both sit together, it becomes 1 plus 1 equals 11, right? So this that kind of a synergy and collaboration happens, and we're always very honest with each other, and also we question each other, we always challenge each other, right? So it's a very good, incredible way of collaborating and co-founding a company, and it's been I think one of the key strengths at Skyroot is also our relation and how we brought things together and took it to the next phase.
You are a classic story of taking India to the world, right? Because as you said, when you build in space tech or any deep tech, the opportunity is global. And today, I think from an India perspective, the more we have deep tech startups like you coming out and building from India, I think that is what will take India forward. So something where if you were to, given your journey, pass on a message to deep tech founders building today, what would it be?
I think first thing is to be hands-on. So this is unforgiving. The sectors, right? So you have to be hands-on, get into the details, and never lose track, never get complacent. Every year is a new challenge, and every milestone is a new challenge. And other thing is that never lose the enthusiasm and never give up. Because you'll face so much brute force in the opposite direction, so much challenge that you may want to say, oh, when this is all it, but never give up, because this is basically the phases where you need to pass, and it should be part of the journey, basically. Whenever the situation becomes so, every day there's a crisis scenario. That's how you solve crisis and thrive, right? So building a deep tech startup is about solving crisis and bringing it to order continuously for for years together. It's a super long journey, and so be hands on, and then never give up at whatever be the situation is. So that's, I think, this be the two messages.
And that's exactly, and every venture will see there's a lot of stereotype from about India, like deep tech, high tech products as a solution that from India to the world. There's a lot of stereotype built over years, like in India, like art tech who won't be possible. All those, fundamentally every stereotype is a healthy mixture of actual some truth and lot of misconception. So
It becomes
that's what a stereotype is, a truth plus misconception. And what the deep tech startup has to break that misconception and truly need to solve for the truth and what is the genuine problem that in India we need to solve for. And that's where the barriers will break, and Indian products, high-tech Indian products and high-tech services will be globally renowned in a matter of time in every domain, not just in the domain of IT services.
Right. So one question: when can I fly to space?
So as long as you can fit in our, like, if you dare and the Indian government allows, you can even fit in our Vikram and Ferric. But that won't be
If
possible.
you're okay not to come back, we have space in the first mission. And yeah, so I think maybe 5-7 years. I think.
Human missions. I think ISRO has also come out with some.
Yeah. So we're going to launch our Gaganyatris in few years now, and that will be a major milestone for India. So India will be a country where, like, we can launch our own humans in our own. Yes. I mean, that's probably like the genesis of space tourism. It'll be like few years until for initial astronauts are like national heroes, like betting their lives on important scientific missions, right? So, but that needs to translate to a reliability and comfort so the common man can fly, right? So that is going to take some time, but we are on the path. Basically, the whole world is on the path where, like, when the rockets get more and more reliable, and you'll see probably the when aircrafts 125 years ago, when the initially, like, the first flight was few minutes, and now, like, you have like 100,000 flights taking off every day. So this, yes. So, and then, like, that tipping point, or that the inflection point is now. Next 5 years is the inflection point. And then we'll see probably, like, now on average, like, 1 flight a day. I mean, not human, but like satellite flight a day. And, eventually it'll be like several 100 flights every day in next 10 years.
And I'm sure in the next few years, most of your investment bets will kick off well, that you need not wait for it to be affordable for a common man. You will be in the first set of affluent class that will be the space.
One of our key stakeholders in your journey, besides investors, employees, government, is also your family, right? So how do family treat you at home, and how do they kind of deal with your ups and downs?
So, like, it's the family, both the parents and the spouse. So because of my even before I started Skyroot, I was right. So, like, both my wife Pavani and my parents are generally supportive of this initiative from the beginning. And of course, they had their own concerns on how this will pan out for any genuine concern. But, like, it's not like it's not strong no advisory from either party. So who are well wishes for on this thing, but they're indeed, like, in a positive way. They've been like, from the inception, they've been very much supportive. And especially as time passes, as we get married and as we get kids, the amount of support from the spouse and the family ecosystem will be even more pronounced. And without that, it's simply impossible for to work on a startup and to extend and work on a startup. It's not just for us. There are people in the company who need to stretch. Everyone who needs to stretch for a goal. Like, these kind of endeavors are not something that you can simply do in a 95 kind of mindset. You cannot get either being founders like us or the key people who are actively doing the work. So the family support ecosystem has been incredible for us, and we really thank them for making us do or enabling us to do what we can so far. Thank you.
What Bharat said is totally true, and in fact, they're also co-founders in the journey, right? So, yeah, very important co-founders in the journey. In fact, Bharat got married before. I got married after we started. So, already, like, ready for the risks. So, basically, my wife was, already ready for the risk. So, I think, yeah, so that way, I think it panned out well so far. And also, it's very important that when in such a high-stress environment, building a company is not easy. It comes with its lots of challenges. Every day, there are like 10 challenges. A lot of responsibilities to shoulder, right? So it's very important to go home and be relaxed and, and not increase the tensions, but be able to reduce the tensions, So that's where I think our families are quite, very, very important in this phase, that, they support us. They're also equally excited in the journey. They watch what's happening, when is the launch. and
They have investor questions.
Yeah, saving investor questions. So they're deeply invested in the journey, right? So deeply invested in the journey, and, like, like co-founders, in the whole journey. And lucky to have, I think, like, both families are, like, incredibly good and supportive, and very well invested in the whole, in the journey, and also, like, pumps us up, whenever we need it. and it's really good. I think it's a fantastic family which we both have, and then I think that is really the fuel for us to keep going and take more risks and then and challenge ourselves and then be able to sustain such high stress environment. It's a very, very important ingredient, and thank all of them to actually be a backbone for us being able to do what we're doing.
It's been so inspiring seeing the whole journey together, and especially with things moving so fast, and now in few years now you already have a launch coming up in few weeks. So wish you all the best. We are all rooting for you. The whole India is looking up on you to make great strides and become one of the biggest space tech companies in the world. So cheers to you and best wishes.
Thanks, Chetan. Wonderful to have you part of our journey, and looking forward to a long association going forward. And thanks a lot for all the support, and really excited for all the upcoming milestones of Skyroot, and all the journey which is going to come up soon.